Hey everyone, I talk about Nuzlocke a lot on my channel, but recently I realized that a lot of you viewers might not know what the heck I'm even talking about. Today, I'd like to dedicate this video to answering the question of what is a Nuzlocke and why would anyone want to do a Nuzlocke? To explain it simply, a Nuzlocke is just a specific set of self-imposed rules. There are two basic rules that every Nuzlocke must have. The first mandatory rule of a Nuzlocke is that the player may only catch the first wild Pokemon encountered in each area. If the first wild Pokemon faints or flees, there's no second chances. The second mandatory rule of a Nuzlocke is that any Pokemon that faints is considered dead and may no longer be used for the remainder of the run. Most players will release a fainted Pokemon, however many will put them in a dedicated PC box. I personally prefer the PC box method so I can easily reference which locations I've already received encounters from. Once you get far enough into the game, it is easy to lose track of your encounters, so you may even want to write them down. Since a Pokemon is no longer usable after fainting, a Nuzlocke run is considered over if the player whites out or runs out of Pokemon. At this point, the only option is to restart and try again. There are a few exceptions to the two mandatory Nuzlocke rules. The most common is referred to as the Species Clause, or Duplicate Clause. This states that if your first encounter in an area is a Pokemon or Pokemon species you've already captured, you may re-encounter until you find a Pokemon you do not already have. For example, if you caught a Zubat early in Mount Moon, and then your first encounter in another cave is a Zubat, Golbat, or even a Crobat, you must retry until you see a Pokemon of another species you can catch. This rule prevents a player from having multiples of the same Pokemon. The next exception is a double encounter. If the first encounter in an area is a wild double battle, the player may choose which of the two Pokemon to catch. The last exception pertains to static and gift Pokemon. This would include encounters such as the Sleeping Snorlax and the Lapras given by the Silph.Co employee. Personally, I like to treat these Pokemon as the encounter for the area. However, if you would like, many Nuzlockers will allow themselves to capture these Pokemon as well as their first encounter. Now that we've covered the mandatory rules, there are a few optional rules you can follow as well. The first is that all Pokemon must be nicknamed. This rule is kind of a fun one. The idea is that nicknaming your Pokemon will help form a bit of an attachment, so the wins will feel so much more rewarding, but the losses will feel so much more heartbreaking. Next up is what players call the Shiny Clause. This clause allows for players to catch and use any shiny Pokemon as a bonus if they are lucky enough to encounter one. The remainder of the optional rules are meant to increase the difficulty of the Nuzlocke. One of the ways to increase difficulty is to play the Nuzlocke on set mode. This is a game setting which prevents the player from receiving a free switch in to counter what the opponent is about to send out. If you've never played set mode before, it's actually astonishing how much more difficult this setting makes a playthrough. The next is to set level restrictions. Typically, when a player sets level restrictions, they will try to set the limit to the level of the next gym leader or Elite Four member's highest level Pokemon. This restriction forces the player to use their entire team and not just finish the game with an over-leveled starter. The last optional rule I will mention is the restriction of item use in battle. This includes potions, which makes the game much more challenging as you can't heal in battle. So why would anyone do a Nuzlocke? The first and most obvious reason is the challenge. Pokemon isn't necessarily known for its difficulty, and by default the difficulty setting of these games just can't be adjusted. A Nuzlocke provides a self-imposed way to increase difficulty for players who want more of a challenge. Another reason is for the variety and replayability. Since a Nuzlocke limits your encounters, you will be forced to use Pokemon that you normally wouldn't use. This gives each Nuzlocke run a level of forced uniqueness, which is refreshing for veteran players who have played the games many times over. The last reason to Nuzlocke is simply for fun. I know that sounds corny, but Nuzlocking provides an entirely new experience, and I'd recommend it to anyone who enjoys the Pokemon games. While it may be annoying to lose Pokemon to RNG and critical hits, a Nuzlocke will challenge you and in turn make you a better Pokemon player. You will need to adapt, improve, and utilize the potential of every team member in order to win, and it is extremely rewarding when you do. All you need to get started is any Pokemon game and your chosen set of Nuzlocke rules. I hope this video has taught you what a Nuzlocke is and maybe even inspires you to start your own Nuzlocke. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a fantastic day.